Good morning. Welcome to Plymouth Church United Church of Christ, a place that is an experiment of the Spirit, where we say that if you are alive, you are welcome here. Isn't that true?
Amen.
No other conditions, just that you be alive and the Spirit, the breath of God be in you. We're so delighted that you are here with us on this Pride Sunday. So delighted, as if you drive by here at night, you'll see the colors of pride, and the colors of pride dance over your heads this morning. We are so grateful that we can be an open and affirming congregation, that for 25 years we have been a place where we say, no matter who you are, if you are same gender loving, we believe you are made in the image of God. And we take it so seriously and are grateful that you are here to celebrate and worship with us today. Amen. Yesterday, the Poor People's Campaign held a rally here, which was a beautiful time of inclusion. We had everything from every kind of speaker that you can imagine here from this pulpit. And what blessed my heart is that there were people from so far away that lamented that they could not come to worship with us every Sunday. So I'm so grateful for who you are, Plymouth. So grateful that when two Muslim brothers came to be with us, to come for prayer, I was able to find a private room so that they might pray. This is what good church is, and I'm grateful for the witness that this church is. Please give yourselves a hand. This is amazing. We will continue now in worship by sharing the peace of Christ with one another. Pride is many things, but one of the most important things as an ally that I witness is that this is one of the few days of the year where many of our brothers and sisters can experience peace.
Yes.
And so today, with tears in my eyes, let us share the peace of Christ with one another. The peace of Christ be with you all.
And also with you.
No.
And now for the contemporary voice, lament and solidarity. To lament is to experience such grief, such horrific pain and loss that it must be voiced. Lament demands a bodily expression. It is more than sadness. It is even more than brokenness. It is a testimony to suffering and a cry for help. Today, we lament the losses and suffering of the LGBTQIA+ community, and we declare that they are losses for all our communities and our world, because each and every one of us is made in the image and likeness of God. God, who is love, commands that we love one another.
Because the reality of hate and loss is nothing new, we speak and remember the 49 lives and the ones so in pain that came to be known to us as the Pulse victims. Now 2 years ago, we have known violence in 1,000 ways in the midst of simply trying to live long before this day.
Whether it is being accused of being a danger to children in restrooms or on campouts, having jobs taken or housing denied, or adoptions refused, or losing friends and family in places to participate in faith, whether it is the 1,000 small pieces of violence when someone is called fag or gay is used as a put-down, this is nothing new. Many others have experienced such diminishment, such belittling, such marginalizing, such bigotry and such violence.
We gather as a faith community, a church, yet church has, more often than not, been a source of prejudice and hurt. We hide behind the name of God to justify our fear of the other, to point eyes away from ourselves, to justify our own hesitation by offering tolerance and acceptance rather than celebration of our diversity. While this is changing, and while we celebrate our progress, it is a painful birth into a new world. However, the birth of something new and beautiful is always painful and even dangerous.
We gather today in pride, knowing that the LGBTQIA+ community has come into the light more than ever before, into public view. There is marriage equality, more common understanding, and a changing society that is learning to accept, often with difficulty and pushback, who we are. At the end of the day, there are young people who still question their identities and families and friends who don't accept or embrace them. They feel hopeless and run from the pain through many avenues, some through drugs, abuse, being sex trafficked, harmed in health, and some who even choose suicide. There are family relationships lost, parents turned away, children who can't understand, and siblings who promised unconditional love but could not share it when it mattered most.
We gather remembering those experiencing homelessness, those immigrants fleeing persecution and oppression because of sexual orientation and for other reasons, all who have contracted HIV/AIDS, and those who we've lost and who died abandoned. We gather recalling those who hated themselves, those whose faith communities turned them away, the voices of recrimination from others and the self, whispers and shouts that they're not good enough, you're not right, you're incompatible with Christian teaching, the heartache and heartbreak of loss. The grief still stings.
Today, in this space, we come to lay that at the cross, to give to God the pain of our lives, the loss to our community, the indignity to all humanity, because we know God is able to take the broken and make whole, the hopeless and bring hope, the torture and death and bring peace, life, and reresurrection. In this we lament, together we embrace solidarity.
Amen.
Amen.
Goliath stood and shouted a taunt across to the Israelites.
Why are you all coming out to fight?
He called.
I am the Philistine champion, but you are only the servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me.
So David left the sheep with another shepherd and set out early the next morning with the gifts as Jesse had directed him. He arrived at the camp just as the Israelite army was leaving for the battlefield with shouts and battle cries. Soon the Israelite and Philistine forces stood facing each other, army against army. David left his things with the keeper of supplies and hurried out to the ranks to greet his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, came out from the Philistine ranks. Then David heard him shout his usual taunt to the army of Israel.
Don't worry about this Philistine.
David told Saul.
I'll go fight him.
Then Saul gave David his own armor, a bronze helmet and a coat of mail. David put it on, strapped the sword over it, and took a step or two to see what it was like, for he had never worn such things before.
I can't go in these.
He protested to Saul.
I'm not used to them.
So David took them off again. He picked up 5 smooth stones from a stream and put them into his shepherd's bag. Then, armed only with his shepherd's staff and sling, he started across the valley to fight the Philistine. David replied to the Philistine,
You come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today the Lord will conquer you, and everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, but not with sword and spear. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us.
As Goliath moved closer to attack, David quickly ran out to meet him. Reaching into his shepherd's bag and taking out a stone, he hurled it with his sling and hit the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank in, and Goliath stumbled and fell face down on the ground.
right, so if you all will just wave for the camera, please. There you go. So, at the moment, at least, my daughter is watching. So I'm glad for that. We'll see who else chooses to join us here. I am thrilled to be able to have this opportunity to speak to you in worship on this Pride Sunday as we're continuing in this month and throughout the summer to be talking about what it is to be fully human, to experience ourselves and know ourselves as whole and perfect and complete people because of who we are as people of God. Today we are celebrating a decision that this congregation made on May the 16th, 1993. Do you remember what it was? It was our open and affirming statement declaration day. This church, yes. That 25 years ago, this church had the foresight to say, this is who we are. This is who we want to live into becoming even more. And our statement today, we might look at it, or we're going to see it in just a second. It'll be up on our screen for us. But to be able to see it and reflect on what we said, it's in our order of worship as well. And it might need a little bit of tweaking and adjusting now 25 years later. We've come to learn more than we did before. We've come to embrace more than we did even 25 years ago. And so I invite you to share in this statement with me. Believing that God's love transcends all human distinctions, Plymouth welcomes people of all races and cultures, of varied social and economic conditions, and regardless of sexual orientation. We are open and affirming of all people, and we call all people to the cost and joy of Christian discipleship. It's interesting to me that now 25 years later, the word that stands out in that phrase for me is regardless, rather than in celebration. Regardless, almost as if to say, in spite of. I think maybe an update might be due. I think perhaps an opportunity for us to say we are called to both the cost and joy of Christian discipleship in celebrating all that we are. Let me invite you to take a moment as we consider being fully human to pray with me and for me now. Would you join me? And now, God, I pray that through me or in spite of me, you would speak to us, your people. For we ask it in your many names which are holy. Amen. Fully human. Pride to be who we are together. This Sunday is the observation of the 49th anniversary of the Stonewall riots in New York City. It sparked the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender liberation movement of that day when folks poured into the streets and said, we will not be oppressed any longer. 49 years. And yet, even this morning, as we were making our way to take our supplies to the Pride booth down at Seattle Center, there were folks along 5th Avenue and 4th Avenue that already have their signs and their bullhorns out ready, sharing their statements of derision and lesserness And I'm grateful that there was a group of dykes on bikes who were revving their engines right next to them just to drown them out. Amen? My husband shared that as he was unloading the supplies for our church and our denomination, to say we are an open and affirming place, that there were persons who accosted him right there at Fisher Pavilion saying, "We cannot believe that a Christian church would be training its children to become homosexuals." That's happening today, friends. In Seattle, Washington, friends. Being made lesser is not over. Being made fully human still has a way to go. So this morning we're taking a look at this story of David and Goliath. It's a tremendous story. I invite you to read the whole of it later on. But as you begin looking at the story, you might reflect on the ways in which Goliath is taunting the young David. David who's too young. Even not just Goliath, because you might remember that Saul and some of the others said, "Oh, you can't just go out like that. Are you kidding? You need to have armor. You need to have all of these other pieces, and we will be behind you to cheer you on. You go ahead and go out and represent us." Of course, that's what David wanted to do. I'll take him on. I'm happy to do it. And yet part of what David reminds us is that all of those other things, those reminders of being perceived as lesser, were things that were going to weigh him down, make him unable to be fully himself, unable to express who he needed to be in that moment. And I think we've encountered and experienced that a few times before. Last week I was reading a reflection from a queer theology blog that you'll love the title of this. "Why are there so many naked people at Pride?" This just excited me. I mean, that's a title you don't often see in a queer theology, approach, but I love this. It said, if you've ever been to a Pride celebration, you know that people watching is fantastic. There are colorful outfits, elaborate costumes, cute kids, couples holding hands, and more. It's lovely. It's fabulous. And there are no small number of people who are basically wearing nothing. Maybe just underwear or tape over sensitive areas. I've heard other folks mention their discomfort for all sorts of reasons about the nakedness of Pride. Pride, for all of its faults, all of its whitewashing, all of its trans exclusion, all of its corporate assimilation, it is a celebration of life in the face of oppression and repression. If for 364 days of the year you were told that your body is sinful and sick, if for 364 days a year you were told that who you have sex with and who you love should be kept hidden, if for 364 days of the year you're told that your body is weird, or your scars are ugly, or your clothing or your hair or your body type or your genitals or your chest or your arms or your legs or your flesh is disgusting and vile and unnatural, if for 364 days of the year you walk around in fear, if you hide your love, if you hide your body, if you drop the hand of your lover when you're in public, or refuse to kiss your loved one goodbye in front of people at your workplace, if you fear violence walking home at night or being removed from your home or in the broadest of daylight or even the afternoon sun, you are concerned, then for one day of the year, one precious day, you can be yourself without fear of judgment, at least we would hope so. And yet, even today, it's not the case. If for one day you can be embodied, if for one day you can love and laugh and embrace the other and walk around in your underwear, if for one precious, holy day, one special day you can celebrate your body, your flesh, your love, your passion, your life, then you should celebrate it and embrace it and be the full human being that you're called to be, no matter what your letter is in the alphabet of the Pride family, including the allies. Love it all. That's a pretty cool affirmation, isn't it? It reminded me that there's much that we have to do. There would be some who would say that our movement has failed. We've come to see in recent years and months that the half victories that we have won were more about accommodation and assimilation rather than transformation and celebration. Yes, we won marriage equality, and yet conservative politicians and religious leaders were immediately prepared to begin finding ways to undermine and diminish that reality. There are still no job protections in over 30 states in our nation. So you can be fired for who you love. In more and more of the red states, the only thing that you need to discriminate is to be able to claim that your bigotry is faith-based. I don't think that the movement has failed. I think that we gave up, we gave out, we gave in way too soon. Marriage equality was not the end of it, but just the beginning. And like our president, unfortunately, our hubris won't allow us to admit our mistake. We have much work still to do. Aberjani said, "Freedom rings bells to wake us from the comfort of beautiful dreams and empower the efforts that turn them into reality." Father Richard Rohr said, "Love is not about being right. It's about being connected. Being fully human. Pride in who we are together. That is our call this day. Because love is, in fact, the greatest of commandments. Then we need to figure out how to love in real life, to remain connected, to be fully ourselves, to not take on the armor of another if it will weigh us down, to not stand in the face of the derision of others and back down, but rather to stand up and say, "This day I will have your head." To say, "This day I will stand for my people." To say, "This day we, the whole people of God, will be moving forward in victory." Because this is who we are. I see Jesus standing in the gap to guard and advocate for those who were being harassed, those who were being made to be lesser in their community. Jesus was the one who took the form of helping to protect the vulnerable. And in order to love well, perhaps we need to ask ourselves again and again and again, how do I become that full human being? How do I become that person who is moved by compassion to help those who are in the margins of life, to celebrate and find victory and hope? This morning, I'm honored to be able to share this time of worship with Eric Gray so that he might come and share with us also some of the victory and the lesserness and the victory that he's been made to feel.
Thank you, Plymouth, for welcoming me to the pulpit today. If I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crunched into other people's fantasies for me and eaten alive. Audrey Lorde. And that really resonates true for me. Since the time I was born, I have suffered abuse, but abuse from my father, molestation by my father. I was his fantasy. When I was 14, I was sex trafficked. I was so many people's fantasies, and here I lay in these beds of these strangers as their fantasy, feeling really crunched and crushed. And it was in those moments, in these beds of strangers, that I came to know God, that I came to pray when it didn't hurt. I came to pray when it did hurt. I would look into the eyes of my abusers, and I would pray that they feel some love, they feel some humanity for me. And sometimes the abuse would stop. So I come here today in front of you fully human, because it is in these halls under this cross, from the voices of this pulpit, that I came off the streets. That y'all welcomed me here, regardless of how I showed up. It was June, and it was Jennifer Hagedorn that came with me to my first HIV appointment, that helped carry me through that really, really troublesome time in my life, that really, literally breathed the breath of God back into me, helped me keep my head up high. It was Plymouth Church that paid for my attorney bills when I faced retaliation for my activism, held under false pretenses on $500,000 bail. Plymouth Church came through for me during those times. It was Plymouth Church that taught me that the love of a father does not have to come with sexual exploitation, but that it can mean safety. It can mean hope and salvation and a promise for tomorrow. And it was in the halls of this church that I came to flee from my abusers, and y'all welcomed me in here with contemplation and offering reconciliation. And I stared into the eyes of my abusers from the windows of what used to be Brigitte Ramoul's office, and I saw them look at me with ill intent, and I knew that in these halls I was safe. And y'all did keep me safe all that day long, and you hold me safe today. I'm here to say thank you. I'm here to lift up the good work of this church, because if it was not for y'all, I would not be alive today. If it was not for y'all, I would not know that I wish to limit my circles of desire away from drugs, away from addiction, away from the streets. And I limit my circles of desires today to serving God. And I found that here in these halls from this pulpit with wonderful spiritual leaders like we have up here today. And it's because of this I'm able to stay sane. I'm able to keep my body whole. I'm able to truly serve. And I have done that. I have created shelters for our youth of color in this city in service of God. I have created programs that expand services for victims of sex trafficking and victims of the sex trade to expand to all genders. And it was with the pedagogies of the United Church of Christ that have carried me through that gave me the strength and the courage to stand up. The story of David and Goliath means so much to me, because on one hand, LGBTQ people were telling me, you will not find salvation in that church. There's no way. They condemn us. But still, I stood in faith, people telling me on the other side that you're not welcomed here. Not in this church, but in a Christian faith. You're not welcome here, you're sinful. And on the other side, they will not welcome you, you're sinful. But 1 minute of God's love was worth it for me, because it was that moment that plucked me out of the streets where I have experienced hell, where I experienced such pain and violence beyond belief. But it was that moment of God's love that reminded me that I was made in God's image, and God met me in my sin. Truly. Thank you.
Yes. Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Eric. You know, Harvey Milk said, more people have been slaughtered in the name of religion than from any other single reason. That, my friends, is true perversion, says Harvey Milk. Much violence toward our community has unfortunately come from misguided religious sources. And those religious sources have the same capacity to bring about extraordinary healing and renewal. Religion and faith are neither inherently good nor bad. Religion and faith are powers to be used responsibly. And so I want you to know, as a pastor, I am not opposed to religion. I am, however, a student of our Christian faith, as well as our neighbors of many faiths. As a pastor, it's my duty, it's my privilege, it's my calling to actively resist violence, especially the violence that's done in the name of faith. Too many members of our community have experienced violence physically, religiously, repeatedly at church, from hostile family situations, from neighbors, and more. Whether mass violence, such as at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, or the systemic violence, such as discrimination, housing, work, more individualized violence, such as painfully strained relationships, it is violence that hurts us all, not just the LGBTQIA plus community. You see, we will understand that we've made really great progress when the Seattle Police Department car that is currently wrapped in the colors of pride sits right alongside the one that is wrapped saying Black Lives Matter. Then we'll know we've made another great stride. As a cisgender white person, I know what it is to unintentionally slaughter and harm another person because of my own ignorance connected to being a gender minority, a gender majority, or historically racially privileged person. As a gay man, I know what it is to be slaughtered by harmful theology, abusive hermeneutics, and misguided Christians. Whether I am on the giving end or the receiving end of that violence, the results are similar because it's still injury and harm to those who are simply seeking to be fully human. Whether individually or communally, we invite you as the Church of Christ, called Plymouth Church, United Church of Christ, to take time in this month of Pride, not just today, but the days remaining as well, and even far beyond, to remember your own resurrection story, your place where you took on new life, to name your hurts in life, and to be also naming your renewal. Pride Month is an opportunity to name the perversions of the gospel of love, to recognize the violence both perpetrated and survived. And Pride is a celebration of survival, yes, but it's also a time of grieving for those who have suffered at the hands of violence in so many different ways. But Pride is also about the celebrating of who we are together as fully human beings together. So that, like David, we can say, this we do together in the name of the Lord our God. This I do. This you do. This we do as fully human beings. So that each rainbow this month and every day might remind you of God's promise as a symbol of peace and relationship. And that there would not be a day when you're told you can't belong, you don't matter, you shouldn't exist or that your love isn't real. May that kind of pride be all of ours, each and every day. In the name of the one who loves us and puts a rainbow in the sky to tell us. Amen.
We're celebrating 49 years of Stonewall. But we're also celebrating, and we don't know it, a 50-year anniversary that many LGBTQ historians forget. It was 50 years ago that a congregation of LGBTQ people began gathering in a living room in Los Angeles under the leadership of a gay pastor. The Reverend Troy D. Perry was founding Metropolitan Community Church of Los Angeles, 1968. That one congregation grew into an international denomination. One of the largest United Churches of Christ in Dallas, Texas, started out as a Metropolitan Community Church. Blessing on the Gormley Kings who couldn't make it today. Oh God, you have offered unique gifts to each one of us. Teach us to celebrate and share those gifts so that we may create communities of graciousness and love. Through Jesus, we are reminded of the difference that an individual contribution can make. Let us offer our gifts generously for the service of all.
I invite you to turn and face the cross as we go from this place receiving this benediction. Just a word before, I want to express my appreciation to our own Reverend Dr. Kelly Brown and her daughter Indigo for our beautiful decoration in the sanctuary today in celebration of Pride, as well as the lanyard that I have this morning was a gift from Indigo last year at Pride, and joyfully get to wear that again in celebration. And thank you to all of you who walk in this journey of faith with us, because we recognize who we are as fully human people, called to be a body of faith together. And so as we go from this place, go receiving this benediction. Now may you live as long as you want and never want as long as you live. May the road rise up to meet you, the wind always be at your back, and may God hold you in the palm of God's hand as you make your journey of pride throughout this week and your life. May God's grace, God's mercy, God's hope, and God's unconditional love be yours, now and forever. Go in the strong name of the one who loves us so. Amen.
Thank you.